Sometimes the thrill-seeking centers of the adolescent brain can readily outmatch a young person's mental, rational control systems. That risk-taking spans a stunning range across the globe. For teenagers and young adults to find trouble, temptation must meet opportunity. Bobbie Gully's story is a story about young adults, alcohol, cowardice, and crazy behavior that left Bobbie seriously and permanently injured. On the night of August 8, 2014, at 1:30 in the morning, Bobbie Gully, a young, beautiful 20-year-old Bemidji State College student, went out with some of her friends partying. She was a passenger in a truck driven by her friend Mitchell Lee Dirks, who decided to drag race another friend, Lee Brandstrom, down the old County Road 48. Driving way past the speed limit at over 100 miles an hour, Dirks' truck was unable to slow down at a sharp corner and flew straight off the road. His truck rolled over several times, very violently, until it came to a sudden stop. Bransom's truck stopped, but then took off and left this beautiful 20-year-old Bobbie Gully laying in the dirt because she appeared to be dead. Trouble was, she wasn't. One of the passengers in Brandstrom's truck stayed with her until the ambulance got there. Dirk took off running because he was a coward. Here today is Bobbie Gully to tell her story for the first time ever on national TV.
I was in a car accident and I suffered many injuries, such as a traumatic brain injury, 5 strokes, a fracture in my clavicle, I broke my pelvis on my left side, and then all my ribs broke. Both of my lungs were collapsed. I lacerated my spleen and my liver. As I was recovering over the past, ever since the accident, it was a really hard road to recovery. With a determined mind and being really hard on myself, but not terribly, I was very determined. Today, my life is going quite well. I just graduated with my bachelor's degree in speech language hearing sciences. So I actually found my passion and I wanted to become a speech language pathologist or a speech therapist. So then I could help out other individuals like myself and overcome everything. So then I could use my personal experiences through my accident and help other individuals in need like myself.
In this insider exclusive Justice in America Network TV special, our news team visits with Bobbie Gully and her attorney Steve Gabrielson in Sartell, Minnesota, to go behind the headlines to see how Steve successfully represented Bobbie to get justice for her. This is the Insider Exclusive, live from Sartell, Minnesota. It is my great pleasure to introduce Steve Gabrielson to the show. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Thank you very much.
It's been a while, hasn't it?
It sure has. I was just thinking how many years it was, 5 years maybe?
5 years now. You're looking good.
Thank you, you too.
And you're even more successful. I'm glad I'm here. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your firm, why you practice the type of law that you do.
Sure. Well, I graduated from law school in 1983 at the University of Minnesota. I went into a general practice at that time. I really enjoyed it, but I worked with 2 older attorneys who were sort of tired of doing trial work. So I had a tremendous opportunity to have lots of early trial work. My first case, my first jury trial was a $600 defective engine repair case. I was so excited when the call came, my heart was thumping when I got the call from the court administrator's office that a verdict was in, and that's never changed. I've always been excited about that, and then you win some and you lose some. That's one of the things that I like about litigation work is you can win or you can lose. And that general practice then converted into a specialized practice about 5 years into my practice, where I moved into a personal injury law firm. And I ended up trying cases for all the attorneys in that firm for several years. Ultimately, I left that firm to start my own firm, primarily so that I could handle cases from the beginning rather than just handle cases when voluntary settlement negotiations had failed and now it was necessary to have the case in suit. So since about 1997, I have operated my own firm here in Sartell, and I have another office in Brainerd, Minnesota, where I just focus on plaintiffs' personal injury work and wrongful death work.
Good. What is the reason that you became a lawyer to begin with? What drives you?
Well, I didn't really plan to be a lawyer initially. When I was in college, I thought I was going to go into medicine. I had all the wrong reasons to want to go into medicine. I realized that, so I quit college for about a half a year and went out to be a ski bum and talked to my dad and my grandpa and got some different ideas about maybe what I should consider if I wasn't going to go into medicine. When I came back, I thought, well, I'll just keep my same biology major, but I will just be a lawyer instead. So I went to law school. At that time, I had no clue about what a personal injury lawyer was. And as it turned out, that background, I taught anatomy and physiology as a lab instructor for 2 years in college. Now, that has given me such a great insight and head start in reading medical records and talking to doctors.
Right.
Yeah.
Tell our audience a little bit about, some of the legal issues that we have in this case relate to the issue of dram shop law. What is that, and what does that mean?
The dram shop is the common word for the illegal sale of alcohol by a commercial establishment. There is strict liability in Minnesota for illegally selling alcohol. Interestingly, there is no social host liability for providing alcohol.
And define social host for us.
If you come to my house and I serve you so much alcohol that you are intoxicated and you leave and get in an accident with somebody on your way home, I can't be held responsible. I would be a social host under those circumstances. But a bar, a licensed facility that can sell alcohol, would be subject to the strict liability provisions in the dram shop law.
Where they exchange money for the drinks. Social host is not doing that.
It doesn't have to be money, because something of value, yeah. They can give away the drinks at the bar. That's also illegal.
What if I'm a dram shop, if I'm a liquor establishment and I'm watching this show, what should I be aware of in the state of Minnesota when it comes to serving alcohol to some of my customers?
Most of them know this already, but it's a crime to sell alcohol to a visibly intoxicated person. It's a crime for them to give alcohol to a visibly intoxicated person in the bar.
Aren't insurance companies, I'm just kind of curious, aren't insurance companies, don't they have some sort of exception to someone who breaks the law by giving liquor to someone who's clearly intoxicated, so they're excluded from covering that?
No, the insurance companies provide insurance coverage to the bars, to the dram shops, yes, for potential dram shop liability. So they provide the insurance to the bars if the bar overserves someone so that they are visibly intoxicated and go and cause problems for someone else. Interestingly, the person who's intoxicated has no claim against the bar. Only other persons would have a claim.
Steve, tell us a little bit about your client, Bobbie Gully.
Sure. Bobbie was 20 years old back in August of 2014. She lived in Park Rapids with her family. She was about to go into her sophomore year in college. And on this weekend, the weekend of August 9, 2014, she and some of her other friends gathered together at a farm where the parents weren't home, and they were going to have a party before people headed off to do whatever they were going to do that fall. The party at this farmhouse ended probably around midnight to 1 o'clock. The young fellow that was hosting the party invited people that had had too much to drink to just stay over at the farm, and that's what they were doing. And Bobbie is one of those that stayed over there. Unfortunately for her, there had been an older guy that was at the party earlier that evening, probably 8 or 9 o'clock. His friends called him and came to pick him up, leaving his truck there at the farm. After they picked him up, they went bar hopping. And so they were at a bar called Zorba's, which is a large summer gathering place up in the lake area of Minnesota near Park Rapids. It's one of a number of Zorba's restaurants around Minnesota. Then they went from Zorba's to a place called the Huntersville Outpost. And in between, it appeared that they were drinking as they were driving. The guy that was driving the truck that had picked up the older fellow that had been at the party, the boy that had been there was Mitch Dirks. Lee Brandstrom picked up Mitch. Those guys went with another guy and yet another guy back to Zorba's, then to Huntersville, back to Zorba's. Mitch was cut off from drinking alcohol at Zorba's.
By the bar.
By the bar. Later caught with a drink in his hand, so the whole group got kicked out. Then they stopped off at a place in Park Rapids and from there drove out to the farm to let Mitch pick up his truck. When they got there, they woke up some of the kids that were at the farmhouse sleeping, talked to them outside a little bit, and then Mitch and Lee Brandstrom were trying to decide who had the more powerful truck. They both had chipped trucks.
So you got two drunk kids, powerful trucks. They're going to drag race.
Well, no, they were initially going to do something called chain pulling, which means that they attach a chain between the trailer hitches on the two trucks and see which truck can pull the other truck backwards. Lee won. Mitch now wanted to race. And so there was a paved road near the farm site. What that is County Road 48, and it's largely an east-west road, but there was a 1 mile north-south stretch with curves on either end. That's where they were going to race, on this 1 mile stretch, and it's about 3 in the morning. Bobbie rode with Mitch. Lee had one of the guys that I called the Three Amigos, Kyle Canton, riding as a passenger in his vehicle. Another person from the party was apparently riding in the back of the truck, a kid named Billy Kimball, riding in the back of Lee's truck. So they were going to try to race up the road, but Mitch apparently kept jump-starting the race. So they decided that what was going to happen is Kyle was going to act as the race starter. So now you've got Lee in the southbound lane heading north, Mitch in the northbound lane heading north. They go up to the end, they decide to race again. As they come back, Kyle starts them, they take off, but when they get to the curve, about a little less than a mile south of their starting point, Mitch hasn't reduced his speed. He goes off the road at close to 100 miles an hour. The truck tumbles. Both Mitch and Bobbie are expelled from the vehicle. Lee, Kyle, and Billy quickly get to the intersection. They discover how badly injured particularly Bobbie is. Billy makes the 911 call. Lee and Kyle elect to leave before emergency vehicles, including law enforcement, arrive, so they take off. Billy's still there. Mitch is trying to hide in the woods near where he went off the road. He's injured badly as well. In any event, now we have ambulance involved, police involved. Bobbie is thought to be near death at that point. She's airlifted from Park Rapids, which is in rural Minnesota in the northwestern part of the state, down to the Twin Cities, where she has some life-saving procedures performed on her.
What were some of the legal challenges you had in this case?
Well, the easy case, of course, would have been the negligence claim against Mitch Dirks, the driver of her car. Mitch only had $30,000 of liability coverage.
And her medical costs were astronomical.
$1 million by the time she was done. And so what we had to explore was, what were the facts that brought them to that point? What was the full narrative of what happened, what ended up happening out on the road that night? So we looked at the case to see if we could get Lee Brandstrom held responsible because of racing conduct, even though he denied that he was racing at the time of the actual accident. there's more to that story.
Yes.
But I mean, we hired an accident reconstructionist. The law enforcement people up in Hubbard County did just an outstanding job of getting statements from these young people early on. Those statements later helped our accident reconstructionist put together what likely happened out on the road that night.
Right.
Another challenge was, what about the passenger, the race starter, Kyle Canton? In Minnesota, the driver is the captain of the ship, and a passenger can only be held responsible for trying to interfere with the driver, or like grabbing the steering wheel. And these, by the way, are mostly directed at when a plaintiff as a passenger can be held partially responsible for their own injuries. Like if they knowingly get into a vehicle with a person who is intoxicated or otherwise unable to drive, that sort of thing. We wanted to explore a concept in the law called joint tortious conduct that has been addressed by Minnesota courts on a number of occasions, but it has never been applied to a passenger in a motor vehicle accident that is not a plaintiff. I hope that makes sense.
Yes.
A passenger that is purely a defendant, a non-injured person who would be held partially responsible for an accident even though they're a passenger in the vehicle, not the driver. And our theory was that Kyle Canton should be held partially responsible for the accident based on joint tortious conduct because he had taken part in both the planning of the illegal activity and as the race starter, he had taken part in control of the race activity.
It's almost like an accessory in a way.
Well, sure. The difference would be in cases where Minnesota has not allowed this legal concept to be used against a passenger, the courts have said, maybe this passenger is encouraging the illegal conduct. That's not enough. They have to demonstrate some control of the illegal conduct. And in this case, we thought we might have the case that would demonstrate that adequate amount of control.
The final result of this case was what?
Well, we were heading to trial. We were close to trial. And we had had some challenges because by the time we got through much of our discovery, I took 20 or 30 depositions in this case. We had a pretty good idea of all the things that had happened. But a lot of people would have been lined up to pay what they could to get out of the case, including both drivers, the passenger, the second bar, the outpost. But Zorbas had been reluctant to settle the case because they felt, and their manager and owner testified and bouncer testified about the strong policies at Zorba's having to do with controlling drinking activities. You can only get a drink served to you at the bar. People would be cut off if they demonstrate any signs of visible intoxication. Sometimes they're kept at the bar. They said, we actually served him earlier that evening when he wasn't intoxicated, and when he came back, he was intoxicated, and we cut him off basically as he walked in the door. Later on, we kicked them all out. So they thought they might not have responsibility. As it turned out, the strong policies that Zorbas had really were not followed in this case. We were able to demonstrate through multiple depositions, but particularly one deposition of a young employee at Zorbas who had gone off work at the time that Mitch and his crew were there between 10 and 11 o'clock at night. You could see on the surveillance video, I spent hours and hours and hours watching the various views from this grainy surveillance video in the bar. There was this young girl that appeared to have a pleasant exchange with Mitch, and as he left, it appeared to me she started waving and then may have flipped him off. You can't really tell, but I thought this is worth exploring. I didn't know at that point that she was an employee in the bar. We identified who she was, took her deposition. Turned out that she was an employee. She described Mitch as drunk and obnoxious, and this was the first time they were in there. And that led toward us being able to put together a settlement in the case that's confidential, but really has helped Bobbie immensely.
That's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We have Bobbie with us right now, so let's bring her on. It is my great pleasure to introduce Bobbie Gully to the show. Welcome to the show, Bobbie.
Thank you.
And thanks for coming here, seriously.
Yeah.
Take us back to that night when the accident happened. What do you remember about it?
All I really remember, so before the accident actually happened, is, well, I went to a bonfire and I planned on staying at my friend's place. So I gave up my keys, so I didn't plan on leaving or anything. But the whole accident occurring, I have no memory of it at all.
What's your first memory? Waking up in the hospital or what?
I ended up waking up in a hospital. I had no clue where I was, and I read a board with like my information on it, so my name and everything. And all I remember is really looking out like the window, and it's like the rock, like, I don't know, roof. So yeah, I had no clue where I was.
Yeah. When did you fully realize the extent of your injuries? Because they were very extensive, weren't they?
Yes.
What were they?
So when I found out, because, well, no one really told me, I didn't know, but I had a traumatic brain injury. I had 5 strokes. I fractured my vertebrae in my neck and my lower back. I broke my clavicle on my left side. My pelvis on my left side shattered. My ribs all were broke. Both of my lungs were punctured. Yeah, overall, it was just a huge mess.
Yeah.
But
and you were a sophomore in college at the time?
I would have been a sophomore.
You would have been a sophomore.
I would have been going back.
So what was going through your mind about what's the rest of my life going to be like?
Well, I guess I didn't, like, when I looked at the calendar where it had my name, I saw the date, and I was selling sweet corn for a farmer back in Park Rapids, so I actually counted up all the days I missed, and I got paid $100 a day, and I've lost so much money.
That was your first time?
Yeah, I was really upset about that.
What about your medical condition?
Well, I guess I didn't really think about that right away. I was kind of upset with all the summer money I lost, so.
How long were you in the hospital?
Gosh, I really don't even remember.
Okay.
To be honest.
And it seems like you've made a pretty good recovery, but you have some permanent injuries, don't you?
Yes.
And what are they?
Well, of course, like I said, I had a severe traumatic brain injury. So, yeah, that has its ongoing causes. And then...
What are some of those ongoing causes?
Well, I know, like, after I talked to, like, some of my doctors when I was at the hospital, the ones that actually treated me like an adult. Because I had one that, I don't know, just didn't seem like he talked to me like an adult. I was 20, so I like actually hearing everything, realistically. But they did mention to me that I could have, like, memory issues and possibly lead into, like, you know, some kind of dementia later on.
And you're 24 right now?
Yes, I am.
And that happened when you were 20?
Yes.
You've had a number of strokes as a result of this?
I had 5.
5 strokes?
Yep.
Were you taken to the hospital each time or what?
Well, they just occurred because supposedly, from what I was told, my brain was swelling. Yeah. So they were wondering why my brain was swelling, but that's when strokes occurred, I'm guessing.
Steve, there's an interesting aspect of the case in this regard, and that is Bobbie had an undiagnosed condition called patent foramen ovale, where one of the chambers of the heart does not completely close from the other chamber of the heart.
Totally unrelated to this accident.
Yeah, that was a hereditary condition she had, but it probably allowed clots to go up to her brain because of her widespread injuries that she suffered, and it contributed, as well as the injury to her brain, to the strokes.
As the case moved along and you discovered, because you didn't know what happened, you know, when you were initially injured, you discovered that some of the people that were, quote unquote, maybe your friends, your acquaintances, split from the scene.
Yes.
Because, as I understand it, one of them thought you were dead or close to it. What's your opinion about those people?
Well, present right now, I guess I would say I'm just really disappointed knowing that, like, one of them had a younger daughter, and if he was put in that choice saying if it was his daughter, would he approve of that and just leave them? So, I mean, thinking that way, I'm just really disappointed in all of them. Yeah. So, but I mean, you kind of have to forgive and forget. Yeah. I think anyways, so I really don't hold a grudge. You kind of have to get over things.
This case took how long to settle, Steve?
from start to finish, about 4 years.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, what do you think about the legal system that we have?
Well, I mean, you kind of have to follow everything, and Steve really kept me updated on everything, because I mean, I'm not a lawyer, so we don't really understand all the technical terms and everything like that. But having him break it down and always keeping me and my family informed, it really kept things going. And so, I mean, kind of have to do what you have to do.
Right.
So
If somebody came into a similar situation, this case took 4 years, a lot of time and effort on by a law firm. What do you think about Steve Gabrielson's firm handling a case?
I would totally prefer them to go see Steve. Yeah.
I have found with professionals that if they keep you informed on a regular basis, they have an interest in you. Obviously, you do, and they're successful in settling or trying a case. That's the right kind of person to be with, right?
Yeah. And what I really liked, because I mean, you don't want to be like, if you're in like a college classroom or anything, you're more of like a number, because there's so many. But I mean, if you have like a really good connection, it's more like, I don't know, I guess I kind of thought of Steve like another dad, like always looking out for you, always kept you informed. And it's like everything wasn't so serious all the time. It's like if you can laugh and joke with like, well, you're a lawyer, I mean.
One final word. Kids do crazy things, especially when they're young. What advice do you offer the youngsters out there about drinking, driving, that kind of stuff?
Well, I mean, you probably should wait till you're of age. But I mean, realistically, everyone's not going to wait until they're of age to drink. Yeah. But I mean, like what I told you earlier, I gave up my keys. I was not planning on leaving.
You knew the smart thing to do.
Oh yeah, because I mean, if you are actually going to have beverages, it's best not to endanger everyone else. So, I mean, yeah, I really do not promote don't drink and drive, because I mean, you're going to affect not just yourself, but other people on the road.
I want to thank you very much for being on the show, and thanks for coming here.
Thank you.
And best of luck to you in your career.
Thanks.
And lastly, when people contact you for maybe representing them in a case, how do you determine, what cases you're going to handle?
Well, that's always a great question to explore. I start from the proposition that when somebody comes to see me, they have a good reason to do it. People don't really want to have to talk to a lawyer. People really don't want to have to go talk to a personal injury lawyer, because that means something really bad has happened to them. So I take it right from the beginning that everybody's case requires that I listen to what they have to say and then make an evaluation. Two things, really. What are their damages, and how strong is the liability in the case? If I have a case where I may have strong liability, but damages are certainly, they're there, but not great enough to justify the potentially hundreds of hours that I may have to spend on the case, then I will turn that case down, even if the liability is good, and give them some other advice on how they may proceed. On the other hand, if you have a case where damages are extreme, as we'll have in the case today, I may be confronted with more questions at the outset than I have answers, but I may take the case on to investigate it. And my deal with all of my clients is that if I investigate a case and it turns out that there's nothing for me to pursue from a legal basis, they don't owe me anything for my time. They don't owe me anything for my costs. It's just a cost of doing business for me. Hope that helps with your question.
It does. And I want to thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks for joining us. You can get more information about our guest and the issues at insiderexclusive.com.